This episode of the Radical Rant podcast is dedicated to the memory of those who were lost in the Kyoto animation fire attack, as well as the memory of Geoff iNcontroL Robinson. Hey guys, how to make it Radical here. Another episode of the Radical Rant podcast coming at you on a much more depressing, that's for sure, Tuesday night. A lot going on. There's a lot of exciting stuff to talk about, obviously. A lot came out of San Diego Comic-Con. That's where the brunt of this show is going to go on. So once we get through all the sadder stuff, obviously, as the front of the show mentioned, we're going to talk about a few things all related to nerd culture stuff. We got Spider-Man hitting the all-time record for superhero games. We're also going to talk about the Avengers gameplay demo, at least of what we saw of it. We are going to talk a couple trailers, that being Star Trek Picard and The Witcher. And we're going to end off with talking about Phase 4 as to what it's set up to be like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this might be a shorter podcast, just based on the amount of stuff there is. And also, I'm still in a bit of a rough spot. So obviously on Thursday, we learned about the absolute horrific event that was the arson in Japan, specifically one of Kyoto Animation Studios. So for those who don't know, there is a very well-respected studio in terms of anime in Japan called Kyoto Animation, or KyoAni for short. And on Thursday, we found out that someone had gone in, poured gasoline all over the place, and reportedly on several people in the building, lit fire, also intentionally spread the fire to the stairways so people would have a lot harder of a time escaping. And in the end, at least at the time that I'm recording this, we know that 34 people are dead, 35 more injured. We have no confirmation on any of the names of the dead. There have been rumors circulating on a few names that might have been, one of them in particular being the director of Kobayashi's Maid Dragon, which would really depress me because that's been my favorite show in a long time. We have seen a few names here and there that are safe. I don't want to specifically start naming them because if they end up being among the dead, I don't want to be the one to report that. So, I mean, I could go into great detail all the facts that have happened with this tragedy, and I don't want to because the more I think about it, the more disgusted and horrified I get. So, I mean, if you want to look further into it, you can look further into it. I know the anime subreddit has a pretty good mega thread about all the information that's been given out for that tragedy. But it's one of those things that when I first saw the news, I was obviously shocked. And then the longer that it set in and the more information that I knew about it, the more and more difficult that it became as it would sink in further and further. Later on in the Thursday after, because I learned it early in the morning, by the time the afternoon came, it really dawned on me just how unbelievable what had happened was. In fact, it's the largest mass murder in Japan since World War II, which should tell you how unbelievable this is. And for this to happen, of all places, in one of the most well-respected studios out there, in what, from all accounts, say has been a very positive place. It's terrifying. The only other fact I'll give it is that the reports say, and all of this is, it doesn't necessarily mean it's confirmed, although I think by this point, if they're still running with it, I should say, it's probably at least true to some aspect. The guy who burned the place down and killed essentially 34 people, was yelling and screaming that the company had stolen his novel. And the person apparently had been identified, and when asked about this person, no one at Kyoto Animation seems to know who this person is. Now, that doesn't mean anything, but even then, like, to take that, it's even if they stole his novel and it ended up being one of the most popular things they have and whatever else, it doesn't matter. I said this at the very beginning when I first saw that piece of news. I said, really? Like, does this motherfucker truly believe that the lives of 34 people and potentially as many as 75, which is what the estimate of people in that building was, you think your fucking novel was worth those many lives? And that's one of those things where it truly does disgust me and horrify me, because I can't fathom being so hateful to something that I want to not only kill one person, but to kill as many as 75 like that. It's terrifying to me. And it's one of those things that now, nearly a full week after knowing about this, it still hasn't set in, and the more and more I think about it, the more and more it just truly horrifies me, thinking about the events that led to things, all the information about what potentially could have happened during the fire and people trying to escape, and it scares the shit out of me. It's one of those things where I have way too much of a visual imagination. I'm very vivid with it. I've actually passed out in the middle of class before in high school because of how my imagination just hit me that hard. If I hear things that are that horrific, it's very possible that I take it in a much heavier direction. And there were times, especially on that Thursday, that it did, and it scared the shit out of me to think about it. So there are a lot of shows that studio's done that meant a lot of people. Most of them are shows that I didn't keep up with. I mean, I was never into KyoAni, for example. Violet Evergarden, that wasn't my thing. But two shows in particular stand out from that show: Chunibyo and Kobayashi. Chunibyo is probably, if not the show that really got me back into anime. I watched anime a bunch when I was in high school, but I didn't really keep up with what was going on. About 4 years ago, I started getting back in. And Chunibyo was one of the first shows when I got my Crunchyroll subscription for the first time. Really found myself attached to. And fast forward years later, Kobayashi Maid Dragon comes out. And that show ends up being one of my favorites that year. And I can still go back and watch it. I'm almost not sure if I can now because of the memories that are going to come up now. It's one of those things that it's kind of difficult. Behind me on the shelf is a statue or a little figurine of Rika from Chunibyo. And she was one of the first figurines I ever bought. I have maybe 20, 30 of them. And she was one of the first. Those two shows specifically meant, and still do mean, a lot to me. Chunibyo definitely reminds me a lot of how I was as a kid. And then Kobayashi was it's one of those shows that even in your darkest of times, you can't help but smile watching that show. So I owe a lot of the happiness in my life around those times to those two shows. And to see what happened to this studio is tragic, and I can't imagine how this company is going to recover from that. And I mean, a lot of people are just assuming that it's 34 people that won't be in the business anymore. No, it's 34 people dead, potentially 35 to 40 more that aren't going to want to step foot in that company again because of the memory of that day. And then another 75 to 80 people, because I think I remember hearing the staff of the entire company is 150 people among two studios. There's going to be people in that company that weren't even there that are going to need counseling too, because they just found out 34 of their friends and 35 or so more. 34 were burned alive and 35 or so more were burned nearly alive. And that's one of those things where I think people need to understand just how serious this is beyond just 34 people being lost. It's essentially that whole staff has been affected now. And some will be affected much, much more than we think they will, and that's something I think we need to keep in mind. So, but other than that, I can't overstate how sad this is, and how, at least how glad I am that people have stepped up to help out in any way they can. I know that there was a GoFundMe that raised over 500,000 plus, which is great. It won't really heal the pain of those who were lost, but it's something, you know. It's the best we can kind of do, at least from here. We can't really do much from here other than that. So, you know, it's good that we at least accomplished that. But I wish nothing but the best for those who are still alive, and I wish as much hope as I can possibly give for those who are among the family and friends of the people who lost their lives, and that they can eventually find closure. And I have no idea how they will. I really don't. It's just unbelievably frightening to me. And I thought that was the end of my worries this week going into this podcast. And then I find out that Geoff iNcontroL Robinson passed away at 33 years old of a sudden illness. Don't know what it is still. If you are not unfamiliar to my channel, you've probably seen a video that I put out of remembering Total Biscuit, aka John Bain, or I guess John Bain, aka Total Biscuit, a year removed from his passing. And iNcontroL is very much in the same realm as Total Biscuit, not in terms of value on my perspective, but in terms of how I know him. Both of them are well known in the StarCraft community, but both of them I knew through initially the Game Station podcast and soon the Co-optional podcast. And while the loss of Geoff is not nearly as heavy on me as TB was, it's still another one of those people that it's like, man, I remember this guy and watched him on the podcast for several editions of it. So this is over a couple of years. And it's also another guy that died in his 30s. And in Geoff's case, as far as we know, it wasn't something like, you know, a cancer thing where it's a rarity. It's just a sudden illness. So who knows what it could have been. I mean, I remember still, for those who remember Ruby, Monty Ohm, the lead animator, just dying because he got sick one day and they pumped him with some anesthetics and he had an allergic reaction to him and he died. So you never know what it could have been that caused Geoff's death here. You know, we don't know anything other than that it was a sudden illness. As far as I know, that's all we know. So it's just frightening to me. You know, as somebody who is just a year and a half into his 30s, to see two guys die so young and who, as far as I knew, were in decent health. At least TB was, until obviously the cancer happened, and then it went into remission and we thought everything was good, and then it all came back and it just went downhill from there. In Geoff's case, it seems like it was a sudden thing. And at 33, it scares the crap out of me that at 31, I'm 2 years away from that age. You know, I'm already freaking out enough about the fact that, you know, I could die at any minute. And, you know, now that the older I get, the more and more I think about it, even though, you know, I would like to think that I have at least a good 30, 40, 50 years in front of me. And I do think that, okay, well, even if I make it to 65, like I've been alive for 31 and a half years and I can barely remember a lot of it. So it tells me that I've been around a long time. So maybe another 35 years isn't too bad. That's still a lot of time to go. But because I don't believe in things like heaven and reincarnation and all that stuff, it makes it genuinely frightening that you can die so young. And to think that in Geoff's case, I'm literally a year and a half away from that number. It's scary as shit to me. And it could be anything. Like, it could just be sickness, could be cancer that comes up later in life, it could be a sudden accident, like a car accident, could be a fire in my apartment while I'm asleep and don't know about it. Fuck, I could walk into Con Bravo, which I'm going to in a few days, and some nut job comes in and shoots up the place. You never fucking know. You know, it's every day I have to live with the idea that this could be my last, and that genuinely scares me. So, in this case, the Kyoto animation thing is horrifying because of the act and the death toll. Geoff's scares the shit out of me and is horrifying because of how young he was and just how sudden it was. So that one hits me just almost as hard, if not worse. So, I mean, same deal. I can't say too much about him, like, personally, because, again, like, I wasn't too familiar with him. I knew him through the podcast. And each episode that he was on were very good. He was definitely one of their more informative guests and would actually participate a lot. But it's just another one of those things that it's sad as shit. And like I said with the Kyoto animation folk, my wishes go out to the family and friends of him. And like I said, hopefully, they can find closure at some point. Although, for some it takes obviously a lot longer than others. So, all right, let's get out of the depressing stuff. I don't know how long this podcast is going to go because I am still in a very somber, very low mood. So, I'll try to fanboy as much as I can for some of the stuff that we're seeing here, because you figured this would have been a great week to do it had it not been for these two deaths, at least that I'm aware of, that were at least effective to me personally. So, right off the bat, Spider-Man was listed, and this is the PS4 game, by the way, was finally listed as being the best-selling superhero game of all time. Not to mention that we found out recently that Avengers Endgame was now given the king spot as being the highest-grossing film ever, which is insane. Avengers, I'm not surprised by. Spider-Man, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by, but I was more surprised by the fact that it took this long, because I figured since a lot of games back in the day that were superhero based either didn't have a large audience that were paying for it, nor has there been a lot of games in this current generation that would certainly have a lot of people buying because of the sheer amount of gamers. But so many superhero games lately have been just utter crap. So it's interesting to see that Spider-Man was able to pull this off. Especially when it's a console exclusive, which is even more shocking. Because you would think a game like Arkham City or Arkham Knight, being multi-platform, would have an advantage. And no, Spider-Man's king, even though it's on only one console, which is crazy to me. And it's well-deserving. It's definitely one of the better games I've played in a while. And it may actually be my favorite superhero game of all time. I'm trying to go back and think. I really did like Maximum Carnage. That was a big one for me. Arkham City also was a big one. So there's various stuff, but you know what? I think Spider-Man might actually be my favorite superhero game, period. So it's well deserving. In terms of other games, though, we have the Avengers game, and I remember mentioning at one of my E3 episodes. I shouldn't say one of them. I thought I was doing one of them, but I ended up doing all in one. I remember stating that when I saw the trailer, I wasn't impressed at all. With the gameplay demo that we've seen now, I'm still about the same. From what I saw, it definitely seems like it could be, just your standard beat 'em up. Obviously flying around as Iron Man looks kind of cool, so maybe that ends up controlling nicely. Just depends on how linear it goes. But in terms of what I saw, I'm not going to sit here and tell you all of a sudden that I flipped and I've changed my mind and I'm now super hyped again for Avengers. I'm still exactly where I was before I saw this trailer. I'm very lukewarm on it. I'm definitely going to be waiting to see what people say about it first before I even dip my toes into it. Unless they bring out like a beta test and maybe I'll take a look at it then. Because that's what got me into Destiny. I had really not a lot of interest in Destiny. And then when the beta came out, I said, well, screw it. It's a free game. I'll try it. And the second I started playing, I'm like, holy crap, this is everything I could want. And it ended up being a game that in total between the two games, I sunk more than 2,000 hours into. So, who knows? If they're smart, they should put out some sort of a beta just so people can get a hang of it. But like I said, I'm definitely intending on waiting and seeing on what happens with this game, because my confidence is not where it was going in. I thought I was getting a lot different thing than what we got, and it's not quite where I'd like it. It may end up still being good. It may end up being great in the eyes of different people, but right now in my eyes, it's not there. And the gameplay demo didn't really sway me. It looked cool, like it looked fine. But I mean, it's not something that's game changing to me. It's not something that got me all hyped up. And it could also just have to do with burnout in terms of the MCU, which I will talk about when we go through the Phase 4 stuff in a moment here. But I mean, it's just one of those things where not everything is going to be what you think it is, and when you hype yourself up enough for something, you are inevitably going to end up being disappointed. Now, that may not be the case when the game comes out, but at least from what I'm seeing, it's not ringing that bell that's making me go, holy shit, I need to get this. Not like what Cyberpunk's doing, not like what Watch Dogs Legion is doing, So, it is what it is. It could be a great game. It could be exactly what I think it is, which is not that impressive. But, I mean, we've obviously got a ways away before we see that because we don't even think we have a date for that game yet. So, but there were 2 trailers instead that I got really behind. So, first thing, and I saw this yesterday, was the Star Trek Picard trailer. And I'll say out front, I didn't watch any of the TV shows. I didn't watch the original stuff. I didn't watch Next Generation or... oh my god, what was the other one? I feel stupid for now. Was it Enterprise? I can't remember. This is the extent of my old school Star Trek knowledge, guys. Oh no, Voyager. There we go. My real introduction to Star Trek came in the new movies, and it's been a weird flip because growing up I was a big Star Wars kid, and the new movies are nothing to me. Whereas Star Trek I didn't really take into when I was young, and today I actually like all 3 of the Star Trek movies that have come out thus far. So it almost seems like everything is flipped because now after watching the Picard trailer, I'm in and I'm very curious on where this goes. Obviously, I have a big love for Patrick Stewart, stemming first from X-Men. But the trailer itself looked very fun. It's nice to see they're bringing back old stuff. And I watched 1 episode of Star Trek Discovery and hated it, so I'm glad that there's at least something Star Trek related that is getting my attention. And what I saw from the trailer, it definitely seemed like something that was going to be a lot heavier, a lot more serious, which I liked. I mean, there was some fun stuff here and there, but it seemed like for the most part they were sticking to it being a lot more serious and a lot more adventurous, which I'm happy for. I'm very interested in that kind of stuff. And, it would be nice to be able to watch a Star Trek television series and actually get into it for the first time. So that was one thing. And then the second, like I said before, is the Witcher Netflix series. And I've had some very, very cautious thoughts about that series because anytime a video game gets converted into a television series or a movie, we generally know it's going to be shit. So after, like I said, when in my review of Detective Pikachu on one of the podcasts, I don't remember what episode it was. I mean, you'll see it if you look at the graphics on YouTube. But I'm at least a lot more open to video game adaptations in terms of film and television now because of that movie. And the trailer, as it came out, didn't offend me and actually really grabbed me because it didn't stray away from what I know. I looked at that series and knew it was something that had a bit of a lightheartedness to it, but was very serious, had some very dark and just downright sometimes brutal themes to it. And that's exactly what the trailer was. Now, I'm not too big on the look of Yennefer in this show, and it's still a little weird seeing Superman playing Geralt, but I can look past that if the show's story is what I think it is. And considering some of the side stories from the games that they bring up in the trailer makes me go, holy crap, they're not screwing around. They're going to go all in on this. I mean, there's one specific story about the Baron, I believe, and people know exactly which one I'm talking about in Witcher 3 that it looks like they're going to bring up. And if they go full on with that, it's going to be ugly and gross and downright disturbing because that side mission is fucking terrifying. So I'm very curious to see how this goes. Now, I don't have a Netflix subscription. I'm not sure if I'm going to get around to it, so I may have to mooch off somebody for this one, but I'm definitely excited. For once I'm looking at something video game based and seeing what it looks like and going, oh, that might actually not be shit. And that's something I don't get to say very often. So that was very nice. So lastly, I want to talk about the MCU stuff. Before I get into Phase 4, though, I forgot to mention at the top of the show, they mentioned a couple of things on the side, because there were a lot of announcements, good lord. The two that stood out for me, I think there were three, and I'm forgetting one of them, but they did announce Fantastic Four is coming back, which is not surprising. Hopefully they can finally be the ones that do it right. I'll believe that when I see it. But, they kick Spider-Man they hit Spider-Man out of the park, so I'm definitely allowing them to do whatever they want. But then they also talk about rebooting Blade with, oh my god, I can't pronounce that guy's name. Is it Mahershala Ali? I gotta look this up because it's gonna... Mahershala Ali, there we go. And he played, I think he played the main bad guy in the Luke Cage first season, if I'm not mistaken, if I got the right guy. So, yeah, it is. Okay, so I'm not crazy. And I actually really liked him in that show. So the second I heard that being the pick, and I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, he's got the voice for Blade right off the bat. He can definitely fit into where Wesley Snipes left. So I'm definitely very interested in that, and same with Fantastic Four. I'm definitely down to see where that goes. But neither of them are going to be featured in Phase 4. I don't even know if Blade will be a part of the MCU. It's kind of a weird mixture, but I wouldn't be surprised if they do. I think at this point, with some of the things they're going to bring in soon, obviously with Shang-Chi being one of them, I don't think they're getting around anything else. I think they're just going to throw everything in and see what happens. And they've obviously made it work already in the first 3 phases. So we'll see what happens. But they gave us I don't know if this is the entirety of Phase 4 or if it's just the 10 things they have set up now. But this is what we know so far. And this is all dated, by the way, too. Sorry, I shouldn't. So not everything's dated. I think all the TV series don't have a date. Yeah, if I'm looking here, yeah, all the movies are dated. The television shows have not been yet. Because I guess they're still waiting to figure out what's going on with the Disney Plus channel. So right off the bat, the first thing we're going to get is May of next year. So if that's correct, I wonder if that means we're not seeing anything from Marvel for over a year at this point, which is, or at least for almost a full year, about 10 months, which is strange considering how often we've been seeing stuff. But May the 1st is setting to be the Black Widow movie. And that'll be quite interesting. I've been a big proponent of Black Widow for a while. And after what happened with Avengers Endgame, I think it'll be also really interesting to see where they go with it. From what I hear in the beginning anyway, I'm pretty sure they said it was going to be a prequel. Like, I don't know if necessarily it's an origin story, but it could just be like a collection of missions before she ends up meeting up with S.H.I.E.L.D., or maybe it's some of her first days in S.H.I.E.L.D. It could be both. We're not sure. But with the implications of Endgame, I wonder if there's going to be any mention of her having to do with Endgame, or if it's just straight going to be, nope, this is just in the past. Don't worry about what's been happening in Endgame, and from there on out. But that'll be curious, and I'm definitely excited for that because I've been a big Black Widow fan since she first came into the MCU. So the first thing on Disney Plus is set for fall of 2020. That is The Falcon and Winter Soldier. Assuming I get Disney Plus. I'm not sure if I will. It all depends on where I'm at in a year, because I already have Crunchyroll and Amazon Prime, so I can get Amazon Video. I don't know if I want to get Netflix, and I only have so much time. Like, I barely watch anything on Prime Video now, but I have Prime along with it, so at least I can work with that, but I barely have enough time to watch all the anime I watch on Crunchyroll, and that's what's preventing me from getting Netflix. It's going to be just as hard if I'm going to start trying to pay money for another service and watch one show. It's going to be quite difficult. So I don't know. Like, am I interested in Falcon and Winter Soldier as a TV series? Of course I am, but it's a matter of, am I going to be able to get myself to take more time out to watch that as well, because my time is, or I'm juggling so much already as it is, so it'll be interesting to see if I can or not. Once we get into 2021, there's a lot more shows, and that'll really tell me whether or not I want to, and that'll be where it gets interesting. The next thing slated is November 6th of 2020. That is the Eternals movie. I know nothing about these characters. I know that, if I'm not mistaken, Angelina Jolie and Kumail Nanjiani are two of the names that I recognize that are part of the cast. It's going to be like Guardians of the Galaxy, honestly. Like, I'm interested because it's Marvel, but I have no idea what I'm walking into. So we'll see what happens with the trailers. I mean, the Guardians trailer got my attention. We'll see what happens with the Eternals trailer. The same goes for February 12th of 2021 when the Shang-Chi, The Legend of the Ten Rings comes out. No, absolutely nothing of Shang-Chi. Didn't even know he was a fucking character until that got announced. I think from what I understand, he's a newer character, so that's probably a big part of why. But again, I know nothing, so it's going to be whatever the trailer shows me is what tells me if I'm interested in it or not. And that's it. It's not anything else to go with that. Spring 2021 is WandaVision. That being Scarlet Witch. That's obviously the television show. I'm okay with Scarlet Witch. I mean, obviously, I became a big fan of her just for watching her just kick Thanos' ass for a moment there in Endgame. That was fun. But I'm not sure what they're necessarily doing with that. And I'm assuming because Vision is in the name, that has to do something with Vision coming back after Age of Ultron, Infinity War. So we'll see what happens with that. But we don't know, obviously, because no trailers have come out for all the things I'm mentioning. There's been no trailers yet, so it's up to conjecture, and I don't really want to do that because A, I don't want to be wrong on every account, and B, I don't really know much of the comic lore to really have an idea of what to talk about anyway. I go in blind to most of this stuff because I feel if I know too much, then I start second guessing everything, and I'm not quite as hyped up about the movies or the television shows anymore, so I'm trying not to do that. May 7th, 2021 is Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. This is where my interest is full. Because the second the word multiverse comes in, I have no fucking clue what they're going to do with that. And that's what makes it interesting. That's what gets my attention. Because here we are in this area where a number of characters now have been killed off or removed. There's all these possibilities of going back. I mean, we saw what happened in Endgame, what they can do with the timeline. So the idea of a multiverse suddenly opens up so many doors and so many possibilities. Which, honestly, if I'm being frank here, I think what Multiverse of Madness might actually do is put an in for the Fantastic Four, because as far as we know, I mean, the movies have already had two different versions of it. They could open the door of being like, hey, here's this team. Here's Doctor Doom coming into the fray. Who knows? But I mean, it could open the door to too many things to that I can even fucking count here. So that's going to be the movie on this list so far that I'm definitely into. Spring 2021 is set to be Loki. That is a series, of course, that I will watch if I can. If I'm going to have Disney Plus by the time that comes out, I may even just get a subscription for the month just to binge that one show. So, because I am a massive Tom Hiddleston and Loki fan, so that's going to be beyond up my alley. And also brings credence to the idea that I still believe that Loki is alive and well now, because they technically, well, okay, I don't want to spoil Endgame yet because it's still somewhat early in it. But there is a specific moment in Endgame that happens that makes me think that Loki is either, well, I lent. Sorry, English is becoming a difficult thing here because I'm trying to explain myself without spoiling anything. I've had theories about Loki being alive and not actually being dead from what happens in Infinity War. And I'm not going to spoil over that because that movie is more than a year old now, so you've had your chance. If you weren't going to watch it now, I don't know why you wouldn't. So I've always thought he's been alive before this. And specifically, something happens in Endgame that kind of counteracts that theory and makes me think more that they found a way to get Loki back, as the best way as I can put it. So I'm not sure if it's going to be something that happens outside of the timeline, if it's in its own little thing, or if it is a continuation going forward, but who knows. Summer 2021 is the Marvel What If series, which, as far as I know, is just asking questions of what would happen if this happened instead of this. Like, if Iron Man died in Civil War instead of Captain America in the comics. Because I don't know if they're necessarily just going to the films so much as they're going to go to comic timelines. Be like, well, what happened if Thanos never existed? Like, what would happen then? Like, who would hold the Infinity Gauntlet this time? I don't know what they specifically want to do with it, but that's interesting in itself, because it's like Deadliest Warrior. Remember that on Spike TV? It's just like, what would happen if we put these two in a fight? In this case with Marvel, it's what could the potential storylines be if this happened? Like, I think that's always super interesting because it just gets your creative mind going. And the last TV series mentioned is in fall 2021, so we're getting 4 series in 2021 and only 1 in 2020, which is interesting. But Hawkeye is set to be the last one in the fall of 2021. That one, I'm assuming it would probably be more of him getting over being the Ronin, but you never know with that. I can't really speak too much about it. I'm not too big on Hawkeye, so that's probably the least interesting one to me. But I mean, it's not like I'm not in. I'm more just like, we'll see. But last but not least, November 5th, 2021 is the last movie listed, and that's Thor: Love and Thunder. Now, I was really excited for Guardians of the Galaxy in terms of having Thor in there. Or, sorry, I was trying to think of what name we were all giving it. The Asgardians of the Galaxy. But instead, this is what we're getting. And from a few rumors I've heard, and from the title itself worries me. And the reason it worries me is because when you see love, you have to immediately think of Jane Foster. And if you think of Jane Foster, and you think of the way that the current climate is politically, you think of what happened with Thor and the fact that Jane Foster took up the mantle and is given... And look, I'm not trying to be anti-feminist here, but I've seen some of the comics that have been shown from Jane Foster's time as Thor, and they are cringy as hell. They are very embarrassing. And for someone to think that that was going to be a good thing to put in print is a joke. And my worry now is that they're going to try to take that and put it into the films. And I've seen rumors that their plan is to get Jane Foster in film form as Thor. And that scares the crap out of me because I don't know why you would want to do that to begin with. Because, I mean, unless Chris Hemsworth wants the hell out of the role. But, I mean, the way that they played it in the story that he was going to start joining the Guardians of the Galaxy makes me think, well, no, he's probably not done for a bit. So I really hope that I'm just worrying about nothing. In the same vein that I was a little bit worried that Black Panther was going to be nothing but grandstanding and Captain Marvel was going to be nothing but grandstanding. So far, they've had 2 opportunities, and they haven't really pissed me off in either of those 2. So I am in a stage where it's like, you know what? It's either going to be third time's the charm and they really get me, or it's just going to be, okay, well, third time, nothing happened. All right, I can trust them with whatever now. That's the only thing that worries me. That movie is the only thing I have my guard up on right now. And I mean, obviously, when we get the trailer and whenever that is, it's probably not going to be till like the late winter or spring of 2021. So we're a ways away from that, and I'll totally forget about thinking about this for another almost 2 years. So, that's all of Phase 4 that we know of right now. And I'm not necessarily excited about it. I'm hyped up for a couple of things. Like I said, Black Widow is obviously on my radar. Doctor Strange is definitely on my radar. The Loki series has my attention. I might take a look at Winter Soldier. So there's things that I'm curious about, but I said the same thing, going into the first half of Spider-Man, where I said, I think I'm burnt out a little bit. And it doesn't necessarily, I'm not burnt out in the same vein that I'm burnt out of Destiny, for example, and I just can't get myself to play the game anymore. I would definitely go and watch all of these movies. The movies for sure, and the TV shows, who knows. But all 5 of the movies listed, I will see. There's no stopping me from seeing them. So that's not the issue. It's more, I don't know if going into this now that they're going to be able to get my attention and to get my involvement the same way that the last 3 phases did. Because I don't know if you can recreate that magic, or at least not with my generation that started at the very beginning. Because there are going to be kids that are going to grow up and start around this time, or started with Phase 3. Like, there's the way the generations are all working with this sort of thing is kind of strange. So in my case, I'm already 11 or 12 years in, and at some point you start to get a little burnt out. And my worry is that we're going to get to a point that maybe I'm not quite as in as I used to be. Now, who knows? All these movies could blow me away, and I'll just be just as into the MCU as I was for the first 3 phases. Who knows? But because so many people are leaving, it begs the question, right? Like, there's a lot going on that makes me wonder if, by the time that we get to the first Avengers movie that comes with this new set of phases, if I'll be there or not. We don't know. But it's something that I'm obviously willing to look into. It's just, I'm now not sitting here believing that I will be fully into it the same way that I was with the Phase 1 to 3 series. So, I mean, it is what it is. And, I mean, you guys tell me in the comments what you think about all that too, right? So, you tell me what you're excited about and what's got your attention and what's got you worried, whatever's going on. Maybe you're just as burnt out as I am. Maybe you're completely burnt out and you don't even want to think about it right now. Who knows? Let me know in the comments below. But this is going to be the end here. I don't really got much else to go with, and like I said, I'm still mentally trying to take in still what happened Thursday with KyoAni, and it's when I do my anime panel on Sunday. This Sunday, I'm gonna be doing it with YouTuber Glass Reflections, who I've been fortunate enough to do 3 years already of anime discussions with at the convention, and I don't know if we're gonna talk about it at length. I think we might just casually mention it, but it's probably going to come up at some point on Sunday, and I'm still going to be trying to not let it get to me, but it's just one of those things that really puts you in place, in the same vein that a lot of Americans, maybe even to this day, still haven't quite gotten past something like, say, 9/11. It's just, there's something when it relates to you as heavily as some things do, it really does grab your attention. And for example, as a Canadian and someone who lives in the GTA, the van attack that happened last year in Toronto is one of those things, for example, that kind of sticks with you. And I've only recently forgotten. In fact, just me mentioning it just kind of had me remember it and joggle my memory on it. But it's one of those things that you don't forget. And KyoAni is going to be one of those things that kind of sticks with me for a little while. It's in the same that TB still hasn't, left my memory. So it is what it is with a lot of things. It's just, there are certain events that happen that just kind of stick with you for a while. And hopefully I can get past this one, and hopefully other people, especially those close to those who died and those who were injured, can find closure at some point. And it's one of those things where you hope time can heal all wounds, and that's all you can really do. So that being said, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stuff, and share the video with people that you think would be interested in this. But hopefully next Tuesday night when I record, so obviously next Wednesday when you guys see the next episode, I'll have a lot more positive things to talk about. Not to mention I'll have a lot of cool things to talk about from the convention over the 3 days that I'm there. And with that being said, guys, I'll see you on the next episode.